Hello and welcome to another episode of the Young Tongues podcast. My name is Barbara Fountain and I am the founder and CEO of the Young Tongues, a peer-to-peer support group for young tongue cancer patients across the globe. And I bring you another exciting episode today with a dear member of our community. Stephen Bidwell's here joining me. Stephen, we are so delighted to have you here. Most of the community are familiar with you as we see you every Wednesday for our little talks and to be able to learn about um, speech therapy. So we'll go more into that a bit later. But firstly, we always try and start the episode by getting to know our community beyond the cancer diagnosis. So, Stephen, if you can introduce yourself to everyone, please
Hi.
do.
So I'm Stephen Bidwell. I live in Toronto. I just moved here a few years ago. I was living in New York for quite some time, 14 years, but I'm Canadian. I sort of go back and forth. I'm decently well traveled. I'm an actor. I've been to all 50 states bar three. I've been to all of Canada bar the territories. I've been to all of Western Europe, the Caribbean, Australia. I've never been to Asia or South America. So I love to travel is my thing. So that's great. I am, my degree is actually in recreation management, which is completely unrelated. And I also work for a film production company. And I'm a photographer. So I have my hand in a number of different things, all over the place.
Oh, amazing. So, a real adventurer, real creative, always doing
Yeah.
lots of different things. Well, I can my heart's with you because I can see myself a lot in you.
Yes.
So let's dive straight in. Stephen, when did you realise something wasn't right?
So it's a longer story because I've had 5 instances of tongue cancer, and the first was in 1997. I actually was working at Walt Disney World. I think you've got a lot of people in the UK, and I know it's a popular place to go to Disney World. Of course, everyone goes. I worked at Epcot at the Canada Pavilion at the time because they hired people from those countries, and I had what was essentially it felt like a canker sore. You call it like an ulcer. It was on my tongue, and it
Yeah.
didn't go away for a couple of weeks, and I thought it was weird. So I don't. It's so long ago. I don't remember if I went straight to a doctor or if I went to a dentist who referred me. In any event, they did what I now realize was it's officially called like a partial. Why am I in my mind? I'm just about to say hysterectomy, knowing full well that's not what it is.
Oh, brilliant!
Glossectomy.
Yeah, partial
Yes, yes.
glossectomy.
Wow, that's
Yes.
funny. When you're on camera yeah, on the spot. Oh, the words just
Yeah.
escape. Anyway, so they did a small excision. It wasn't anything major. At the time, they said, look, if people ask, it was a stage 0. So it was essentially like I had leukoplakia on my tongue and it was dysplastic. And they were like, go ahead.
So almost like, was it almost
Yes, so
precancerous
that's what
or?
they call it. They call it a
Yes.
stage
Yeah.
0. And dysplasia, they were like, look, we're going to remove it because the possibility exists that it could turn cancerous, and it is important to get rid of. And I was like, okay, cool. So until this most recent episode, I never considered myself as having been a cancer survivor or having had cancer. It's a weird thing because it's like I have a history of being in hospital since I was born, lots of problems. So going to the hospital and having yet one more thing wrong with me was just like part and parcel of it. I'm going to ramble, but I will say what was really difficult is that anyone in the community knows, like, your mouth is really tender. Anyone who's had any kind of oral surgery whatsoever knows it's really difficult. And imagine it being on your tongue. And they did both sutures and cauterizing when they were done. And it happened to be, it's so weird because this was 97. We didn't have like access to lots of TV. I was on the couch laid out at our Disney accommodations. And I can very vividly remember there was nothing else on TV except the death of Princess Diana because it happened at the same time. That's how I
Oh,
remember the
wow.
date.
Yeah. That,
Yeah. So I was
yes.
fine. Oh, go
That's,
on. I could just talk and talk.
and, and you, no, no, that's fine. But you must have been really young because this is a long
Yeah. How
time
old was
ago,
I?
and you do not look like you do not look old enough to
I've got my
even.
calculator here because I'm like, what? How old was I? It was 1997.
Must have been like a baby.
I was 26. Yeah.
Yeah, really
Yeah.
young.
So
Wow.
was I
Okay.
26? There's no way. In 19. Wow. Okay. Sorry. I'm losing track of how old I was. Yeah. I was young and I was living at Disney World, like living with people who were there. It was essentially a year paid vacation. It was like being at college without any responsibility. So we were able to like go into
Oh,
the
wow.
park after hours or just, oh, let's go to the France Pavilion for dinner. And so I was living a really happy, fun life and coming into myself because I was a very shy person prior to that. And so learning travel, meeting new people was really, really great for me. And so it was really difficult because suddenly under, I was someone who needed care and I didn't want help. So I just sort of hid. And then I was better and I sort of pushed it off to the side. I sort of pretended that it didn't happen. So yeah, and I didn't have another instance again for 10 years. Now I moved from Orlando to Vancouver, and I was living in Vancouver. I did set myself up with an ENT there, so that I was having follow-ups just to watch because I'd been told you should watch this. But it was always fine. No big deal. I was with the BC Cancer Agency. We're actually following people with oral cancers, so I was going. I was part of a study, and then I I went to I went to New York. This is now 2007. I went to New York to do theater school. I went to Circle in the Square Theater School, and I don't because it's been so long. I don't remember if I had an ENT in New York who looked at me or if it was someone in Vancouver prior to going. Regardless, I knew that at Christmas I was going to be going back to Vancouver to have another excision done because there was something up. This was the largest excision that I've had of the five. They did take a larger chunk of my tongue, and of course, the cauterizing is terrible. I don't like the cauterizing, and so it was at that time that my tongue did the shift. Like if I stick my tongue out, it sort of like moves to one side. Yeah.
One side. Yeah,
And
yeah,
it was really hard because
absolutely.
I was in theater school. This is where you're using your voice. It's a very important tool because it was such a large excision, and my family are not in Vancouver, but that's where my doctor was. So I stayed with friends who were lovely. They let me stay with them. They took care of me. But I felt again like I was being a burden on people, and I hate being a burden. But I was there with them for 2 weeks because it was such a large excision. And then I flew to Ottawa. This was still over the Christmas holidays, and Ottawa is where my family is. And I did a follow up there with an ENT who said, "Do they still have the sample that they took? Because I'd love for them to test it for HPV." And so I reached out. They did, and that was when they started realizing that HPV can cause oral cancer, can cause tongue cancer. And it turns out that yes, it was
Yeah.
positive for HPV 16. So I don't know what the first instance was. I have this feeling that it was HPV related as well. And my recurrences since are, I think, unrelated because it's just now that you've got it, you're more susceptible. But it was hard because I spent a couple of months in going back to school and I had a very bad speech impediment. But I was also very lucky because twice a week we had speech class. And I had really supportive classmates, but it was difficult because your voice is your tool. Yeah,
And to be fair, having gone through musical school and elocution lessons myself, that's already hard without a
yeah,
speech impediment. So let alone with having a different type of tongue and having to
yeah.
compensate for it. I can only imagine. Oh God, I have to admit, I used to hate elocution lessons, but it probably had also something to do with we had a really wicked teacher. He was ancient and he was in
Oh,
German as well. And oh my God. And I'm Swiss German, so we don't even speak like proper German. And he was just going for me because I was like Heidi from the Alps and spoke like a farmer.
oh my god.
I just remember. So I remember when I got diagnosed and they said about speech therapy, and I was just in my head going, "Oh no, not again! I thought
Oh no.
I
Oh my
escaped
god.
this."
So you totally understand and can
But no,
relate. I mean, everyone in our
totally.
community can relate. But yeah, as performers,
Mm.
it's so interesting. And having history, I was very fortunate because our speech teacher is lovely. We're still in touch. She was fantastic and very supportive as well. So I was very fortunate for that.
Mm. That's amazing. So we're now 10 years on. Is this your
So yeah, so it
second
was
incident?
1997 and then 2007, and then it took a few
7.
months to recover from that, and I was fine again until 2020. And I was living in New York, and there was another spot, and we become very aware of our mouths. I thought, well, I should get this checked out. I saw an ENT. He said I should see a different ENT. They did a punch biopsy, which is just awful. Like anyone who's not an, I don't know, have you had this? It just they're freezing. Oh,
I had the incisional
okay,
biopsy, which was off. Well, they do the local anesthetic. They take the biopsy. That part is, I mean, it's not pleasant, but it's not
yeah,
awful. But it was once the local anesthetic wears off, they don't give you any pain medication. They just say, "Oh, over
yeah.
the counter stuff will be fine," and it's not fine. It
No,
no,
it's true.
no, no, no. I was traumatized from that because it came on so suddenly, so quickly, the pain, and I'd never felt anything like it. And I screamed and yelled for hours. There was nothing anyone could do. I was absolutely. I thought at one point I am going delirious from not being able to recover because the pain doesn't. It's not like when you bang your leg and the pain comes and goes. This
Yeah,
is just constant. And I honestly thought I am going to have a psychotic break here because I can't deal
it's a
with this
constant
pain.
throbbing.
And but it was also constant, and it started to subside by the following day, and then it was just painful for days, but it wasn't the
Yeah.
sort of shocking pain. But yeah, what is a punch
Essentially,
biopsy
so,
like?
well,
I've never not
it's
really.
just a like almost a surface thing. They freeze your tongue, and then they're essentially taking
Mhm,
a small sample to then test to see what the result is, and that's when they were like, "Yeah, you have."
mhm,
Again, because I literally like wanted to put this out of my head. I think what I had at the time was severe dysplasia from the punch biopsy, and
mhm.
that's when they went in and they were like, "Great, so this is I did squamous cell. There
Squamous
we go.
cell? Oh,
Margins were clear.
yeah.
I don't remember the sizing because I was also really trying to be an ostrich. Like again, just stick my head in the sand. I don't want to be. I don't want this special treatment. I don't want to be different than everyone else. So, um, and I really 2020 is when I first started working with the current ENT that I have in New York. Dr. Trube, I will say, it was difficult at first because he's very handsome. It was distracting. It was very strange. Because I was like, hi. Really funny. So we did, he did that. But that, yeah, that's the first time that he did a partial glossectomy. It was squamous cell carcinoma. And then he took skin graft from my leg to then put on my tongue, which I think was, though it's annoying, it's so much better than the cauterization because the healing
Mhm,
process seemed so much better and easier for me, which I was
mhm.
very grateful for. Um, but I'll tell you, I don't remember much of that experience. What I do remember is then, 2021, it came back again. Um, so we did another excision, it was, I guess, squamous cell carcinoma again. God, I'd have to go through all the records. They did another, so they took another patch from the opposite thigh. It was a larger patch to do on my tongue. And each time, of course, I ended up with speech. I was so thankful because I was at Columbia Presbyterian in New York. They set me up with a speech therapist in advance so that she knew what the baseline was prior. And then I was able to see her afterward once things were healed up and then work on speech therapy as needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the fifth time was
Yeah.
most recently. So it was 1997, 2007, 2020, 2021, and then it was a year ago, almost to the day that today that I was like, there's something on my lymph node. I knew there was a lump, and I will say, for a couple of months prior, I felt like something was wrong. I had been told not to drink alcohol, and I was really avoiding alcohol. I'm not a big drinker in the first place, but socially, I was like, sure, why not? And I was working on a cruise ship at the time. I was in the UK, and a friend was cruising, and I was like, well, this is a perfect excuse for me to have, it's a special occasion, I'll drink. And I had a couple of drinks, and I was like, no, this is hurting. I kept it quiet, I kept it to myself, but I mentally knew. Though sometimes I think to myself, did I create, like, it was, what is it? Like exactly, like,
Self-fulfilling
oh, I think I
prophecy.
have it. I don't know. But then I felt something was wrong. I stopped drinking, and the ship was actually going to be crossing from Europe going to New York, and I had a long-standing appointment with my ENT anyway. So the second day that we were in New York is when I had an appointment, and I knew, like, there was this lump was here, and I thought, this is strange. It was difficult getting off the ship. It was Immigration held us for so long. I was in a rush. They almost canceled my appointment, but I was like, no, you have to hold it. I know I'm going to be 20 minutes late, but it's really important because I won't. I went in. He froze it, and then I don't know, he did an excision, but he like took some kind of vial.
Yeah, it's a
That's it. Thank
puncture
you.
biopsy. That's what they do with lymph nodes. I've
Okay.
had a few of them, but they're all right, aren't they? Because they
Yeah,
don't hurt as
I'm
bad.
paranoid
Like,
of needles now. Like I have a lot of PTSD. But yeah, it actually was like they just sort of, it was, yeah, it was fine. I got back to the ship. This is the longest story ever. I'm so sorry.
no, keep going. This is
I
really
got back to
interesting.
the ship because we had to, certain time be back because we're now sailing to Bermuda. And I had not been feeling well, so I went to the ship's doctor, and oh, lo and behold, I have COVID. So it's the second time in my life that I have COVID now. I have to go into quarantine. So now I have a week on board the ship where I am in quarantine, feeling miserable. It was the worst. I felt horrific. Like the first time I had it was bad, but this was awful. And while I was in quarantine is when I got the results from the little biopsy. I had told them, like, I'm working on the ship. It's okay. Please send it to me in the portal, the my chart portal.
Yep.
And yep, sure enough. So he said, look, I know you're scheduled to be finishing on the ship. I think I only had 2 weeks left. He said, that's fine. We're going to schedule you in. So I got off the ship on October 21st. And on November 1st, I went for so they removed all of my lymph nodes and they did another excision. They didn't need to do, I was very thankful, they didn't need to do any kind of, it was just sutures in my mouth with a bolus. But bolus, I don't even
Okay.
know, it's almost like packing that they put there.
Yeah.
They didn't do, I know that, now knowing what I know, now I understand why I woke up with my arm shaved. I didn't know the possibility existed that something else would happen.
Oh, they didn't
Well, I
tell
don't think
you.
that he thought it was that bad. I love my
Okay.
surgeon, but and I didn't know until I joined Young Tongues, like what all of that was that they can recreate. I've learned a lot, and it was not fun. I was thankful there was only one lymph node that had been it had metastasized to, but they did remove them all for safety. But He explained to me the lymph node. He's like, if you picture it like a grape, the cancer had just broken through the skin of the grape. And so that's why they then recommended that I do radiation and chemo, because they don't know where else it could have gone to in the body. That was not fun. I was staying with a friend in New York. It was the New York City Marathon. She was running. So here I am with my huge bandage on my neck, cheering her on. I'm very thankful that I have a space that I can be in New York. And then the decision was, do I, because I, you know, I have my own space in Toronto. Do I burden myself by staying with someone in New York for treatment, or do I live in my own space in Toronto? And so that's what I did. I chose to come to Toronto, and I was thankful. I'm very fortunate because I've had very good care everywhere. I was at Columbia Presbyterian. My ENT is the head of the department. He's also a teacher. Pardon me. He teaches up and coming ENTs. He does really great work, and he understands quality of life is very important, and understands my experience as a performer. So he's very cautious with what he does, which I'm very thankful for. I said, look, I'd like to do Toronto, and the only reason he agreed to it is because Princess Margaret Hospital is here, and it's one of the top cancer hospitals in the world. So I was able to get in very quickly. I had already established myself with the team here anyway, so they knew me. So I got in, and then I did my 33 rounds of radiation. I did 3 rounds of chemo, the cisplatin, but then I ended up getting, you'll be more familiar with this, they said, if you get a fever, you need to go to emergency, because I guess my white blood cell count was low. I went to emergency, and then I was admitted to the hospital for 2.5 weeks because they needed to get my cell counts up. I was very fortunate. I had some great friends who came to help me out and stay with me, which I was very thankful for, who like flew in from out of Toronto, from New York, from Rhode Island, from Ottawa. I really, like, family came. It was really lovely. And I finished on February 1st. I could not speak. So many of the people who are part of our group will understand this. I was really wary of the feeding tube, and I refused it.
Yes.
I had actually spoken with Jamie. I was like, look, they're talking about this feeding tube. They want to put it in advance of starting treatment, just in case. But I'm really like, I know that my comfort is to sit in a bathtub. I was like, if I have a feeding tube in, I'm not going to be able to lay in a bathtub. I sleep on my side. It's going to be, so Jamie told me of her experience, and I thought, I can do this. A couple of weeks before I was meant to finish, it was a bit of a regret that I didn't, because it was really difficult to swallow, really difficult to eat. Of course, everything tasted horrific. But by then, because it's the Canadian system, it was too late for me to actually get a feeding tube, which worked out well, because honestly, like, it was, once I finished treatment, I was able to consume food, soft, liquidy foods, whatever, relatively soon afterward. And I'm glad, because I don't think that the feeding tube would have been, I've heard from other people in the Young Tongues community. I've seen how it's impacted people. I've seen that they've kept it in for months. I don't think that I could have done that. I was not in a good headspace at all.
Yeah. No, totally. No, absolutely. And I mean, everyone's experience is unique in terms of this feeding tube. And some of it has to do with the healthcare providers as well. So I know, for example, people in the UK end up having their feeding tube for longer because of the backlog. So we're struggling to get in because it's a procedure to take it out. So they have it, but they're actually not using it anymore. But they have to wait months and months until someone can take it out safely. So that's an aspect as well. Oh my God, Stephen, your story is so interesting, and it's so different
long
to so many others. Well, no, but but what I really like, so some of the aspects I really like is they've done everything they can do to preserve your tongue? Because I'm sort of thinking, I'm listening, I was like, okay, he's had a bit taken out there and a bit taken out. In my head, I'm going like, how much tongue is there
Yeah,
left? How much more? But they've obviously with suturing and with skin grafts were able to protect most of your tongue that they
yeah,
could, without the need for a flap, which would have been a
yeah.
different
I'm very
experience.
fortunate in that sense. It's also none of them have been particularly deep, which I think is why.
Mm.
Though I did speak with the ENT. I actually saw him last week, and I was like, "Look, if this happens again, can you like can you do the same thing?" And there's not much left to be able to do that again. I think if something comes back, it will have to be a reconstruction. Um, and
Mm.
so I am just you know praying that I don't have to go through that.
Just taking
Exactly,
it day
like
by day.
six
Um,
times is
and
not a
and
charm.
and if you, yeah, no, but also if you do, you have an
Yes.
entire community of
Yeah.
people who've been through it. And also, I think what you are a living testimony for is the difference in catching it
Yeah.
early.
I'm very fortunate that because of my
Yeah.
history, because of my previous medical history, and my mother was a nurse, I go to the doctor.
Mm.
And I lived in the US. I know a lot of people who will wait far too long because they don't have proper insurance and because the copays are very expensive. I go to the doctor. And I think it's really important that people
Mm.
understand that this is like an immediate thing, that if you think there's something wrong, you need to get in. I'm glad that
Mm.
that I'm a little bit like paranoid medically, a little bit of a hypochondriac, because it actually I think is what helped. Um,
Yeah, it's ultimately having a good awareness of your own body
yeah,
is healthy. And I think sometimes it's society, or the impact of having watched films and stuff, the whole hypochondriac, because most of us
yeah,
aren't, let's be honest. It's a very, very small proportion of people who do have hypochondriac
of
or
course.
are hypochondriacs. And yeah, but that's something else, totally different. And I know what you mean by that, because when I got diagnosed, I thought, oh, they're going to tell me I'm a hypochondriac. And they didn't. They went, oh, no, 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 you
Yeah,
came in at the
yeah,
right time. And I think, again, it makes such a difference. And also, I'm so glad that from your first experience at 27, that even though you wanted to move on with your life and not have this special treatment, and I totally get it, but you were still vigilant. So when something else popped up, you were like, oh, I need to get this sorted
do
out, I
you know
need to
what's
get
interesting is
seen.
that I really
But
do.
yeah.
I follow the prescribed uh, regimen, let's say. So for my
Mm.
speech, they told me what I needed to do. I did it. I even my ENT now is actually, he's quite impressed. He said, given what you've been through, someone with the exact same scenario, the exact same treatment, I'm fortunate because I did come out really well. He's like, there are people who've done the same thing as you, and they are literally crawling on the ground for months afterward. Like it takes such a toll. So it's also, I think, luck. Luck has something to do with it, because some people's bodies just don't
Mm.
react the same way. But I'm also following the regimen. I used all the creams and ointments. I researched as much as I could before the radiation. I still do my speech exercises to this day. I do them literally. They're memorized. So while I'm making my bed in the morning, I'm doing them, because by the time I'm done, just go
Mm.
through them. I really I do all of my lymphedema exercises daily. There are a couple days it doesn't happen. Wake up late, whatever. Um,
Well,
I'm fortunate right now, I guess, because I'm fortunate. I'm not working very much right now, so I would like to have an income, but at the same time, it allows me
mm.
the time to be able to commit to that, because even 20 minutes a day of doing all these can just be annoying. But I'm doing it, and they're happy that I'm doing it.
Yeah, and not just annoying,
Yeah,
but also difficult because some people, who have family
yeah,
commitments and careers, and it's really difficult to fit more stuff into your day. And let's be honest, it's not just 20 minutes, there's lots of
yeah,
other things that come with it as well. You talked about lymphedema, but there's also skincare, there's routines for
yeah.
everything that we want to do in order to improve our health. So, absolutely. Now, I just want to go back to an aspect that you've mentioned a lot, and I find it really interesting because it was not my experience because I'm an extrovert. I was like, oh, I have cancer. Yes, you are all going to know about it, and I'm going to get
Yeah.
whatever I want. But you mentioned that you felt like I don't want this. I don't want to be this special person, and you coined the term of putting your head in the sand. And I know that there will be people listening who really feel you and really are there with you. So I want to delve into that a little bit more in the sense of what was it like to feel those emotions, and to be in that. So yeah, and if you're like, oh, I actually don't want to go back there, Barbara, you just, you tell me, and we'll talk about something else. But what was it like for you on an emotional basis to be in that place again and again and again?
The first couple of times, again, because I'm used to having being in the hospital, I just was like, I'm just gonna pretend it was a coping mechanism to ignore it, to not talk about it, to not want the attention on me for something like that, to want to be, because I was really shy in high school, felt really uncomfortable. I've recently um, I've recently figured out. I finally finished a series of therapy over 3 months. I always knew that I had like anxiety and depression, I suppose, but I found out like specifically I have social anxiety, um, and I think I've always known that, but like now I know, and it explains a lot of my history. It explains a lot of the things that I've done in my life and how I've reacted to groups and whatnot. And um, growing up as a kid who was closeted and gay, I didn't want more attention on me. I didn't want people talking about me. So I didn't want this to be one more thing that people were talking about. So I really, uh, it's hard for me to put an emotion on it, but um, I didn't want to feel othered, right? Um,
Mm.
this time, the last three instances, it's been interesting. I think in 2020, I kept it amongst my close group of friends. But in 2021, it was COVID. So I was, we were at home. I did mention to people online, people obviously have known in my life. And I was like, look, this is happening yet again. It's just really annoying. I, and I felt a little more isolated, so I shared on social media. But again, I never felt like this was like again, I didn't want the attention. I wanted the support, um, but I felt almost embarrassed about it. And I have a number of friends who are cancer survivors. My best friend Shannon lives in New York. She is a childhood cancer survivor, an advocate. She is a mentor to others. She's on the board of a cancer agency, a not for profit. She is someone who is a cancer survivor, went through all of this, but because I've only had surgeries, it never felt like I could claim to be part of this group. But this time I was told I was having radiation, and this time it had metastasized into an area that I felt was not just like an oral annoyance, but like, oh, this is more important. Um, and I was scared. And I will say, like, I've been previously scared. Like, I have told dentists, I have told ENTs, like, I have PTSD. If you go to give me, like, even my regular dentist, I was getting Invisalign, or there was a cavity. You're putting a needle in my tongue. I was like, I am going to scream like I am like a 6-year-old that is in pain. You don't understand. It even happened recently because I had to have a gum graft because it was shifting down. I told the doctor here, the dentist here in Toronto, I was like, "You don't understand." And after he put the needle in, he said, "Well, I guess we should have closed the office door. You did warn us." And I was like, "Yes." Like
Okay.
PTSD. If you go in my mouth, I am paranoid. I have to go on beta blockers, so Ativan, something to relax me. I take lots of Tylenol beforehand to help with the pain. But it's a paranoia. Even so much as when we go for checkups, they want to scope through your nose and down to your throat. I cannot do that. It's taken me a long time to be able to advocate for myself and say, you can't do that. I actually have two deviated septums. It's literally like pushing my brain in. I'm a singer. I can lift my soft palate. You can go in through my throat. It's fine. But it took me a while to understand that I could do that and advocate for myself so that I have to be able to verbalize, I am scared, this is what's happening. Um, and for the first time ever, when I had the diagnosis for this latest recurrence, I had to meet with a radiologist, and I couldn't stop crying. And he said, "Do you want me to give you a prescription for something, for Prozac?" And I was like, "Yes." I said it without hesitation. I've never been on medication for anything like that before, and it was the best thing that could have happened because right now, like I'm feeling emotion coming up, and my eyes are like, but I could not have had this conversation before. Like I would have been bawling.
Okay.
So it's a very low dose, and it's the best thing that I probably could have done. And it's what has gotten me through everything. It's what got me through the radiation and the chemo and feeling like I'm a patient, feeling like I'm a cancer patient, and having to ask for help. I was very vocal about it on social media this time. I knew that, this is not just a couple of weeks of recovery. I'm not going to be able to work. So I had to do a GoFundMe, and I was so hesitant. I felt embarrassed. Having to ask for help is really hard for a lot of people. And I am going to cry. I was really touched by the support that I had from people that got me through. Um, yeah, and I was really surprised and very touched, and it was very needed. So
There's a few things there that, firstly, thank you so much for sharing that with
no
us,
problem.
Stephen. Seriously, thank you. And the first thing that came to mind was, statistically speaking, there's research on this. Head and neck cancers, so not just oral cancer beyond that, but head and neck cancers are the most burdening type of cancers on your mental health. And what's even more shocking is that there's quite a lot of a high suicide rate amongst head and neck cancer patients. So it is really, really important that we ask for help and that we are offered help without even asking. I'm really glad to hear that your radiographer turned around to you and said, "Hey, do
Yeah,
you think this would help you?" Recognizing that you
yeah.
needed that type of support. And I'm really proud of you for saying, yes, actually, yes, I need it. And that's not a given. That's really hard. And the other thing I felt, I just wanted to comment on, because isn't it funny how it sometimes takes something really big and seismic like this to happen for you to realize how incredibly loved you are, and how people will go fly miles and walk miles and go that extra length to show you and give you the support to help you through. And I always think that's a huge testament to the individual, but also the community and the families, related or not related, around
It was
us.
really
So
good because
yeah.
I've worked and lived in I've worked and lived in 3 countries. I have traveled extensively. I know people globally. I worked at Disney World. I worked on cruise ships. I know people around the world who I don't see often, and I'm thankful. Social media has its pitfalls, but certainly one of the benefits is that you're able to keep in touch with people and be reminded of the love that's there. And I was, God, it was so nice. It was just like, oh, that's right. You're there. You're in my corner, and I love you, and you love me. It was really like touching, especially given the time of year that this was all taking place. Like, it's a dark time in the winter, and that can already lead to
Yeah,
seasonal affective disorder. Like, it's not a good time. So yeah,
yeah. No, I got diagnosed in
yeah,
December,
it's
so
awful.
I was like, and then I had all of January, which was so bleak, just waiting for the operation, and then I had the operation in February, which was even
Yes,
bleaker. It's just
exactly.
like, oh my god. But yeah, no. But the good thing was is that my healing sort of coincided a bit with spring, so at
That's
least it
literally what
started
I
to
was
feel a
like.
bit better.
This if this had happened in the summer, I would have been so pissed off because I was one of the things that I
Yes.
looked forward to. One of the things that got me through it all was knowing that I like my building has a pool. I live on the water in Toronto. I'll be able to go to the beach. Pardon me. I get indigestion now badly. The fact that the summer was going to be there and I was going to be able to, with the addition of lots of extra sunscreen, be able to relax outside and enjoy that instead of sitting in my apartment looking at the good weather. I mean, I did a lot of that too. Like, I'm not gonna lie. I was really depressed at the beginning of the summer. It was beautiful out, and it was like, oh god, getting myself out of the my place was difficult some days. But I'm also thankful that I live in a building. For the first time in my life, I live in a building that's very social. Like, I have friends who live in my building. We hang out at the pool together. We go to dinner. So I had people close by who were like, "Hey, are you coming down?" And though I said no a couple of times, eventually I was like, "No, I need to actually be around people," and it was really good. It was good for me here mentally. It was important. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you bring us to a really good point because we talked extensively about the operations. We know that you've had was it 33 rounds of
Yeah.
radiation, you said, and chemo as well. So chemo radiation again. Not many people have the combination of the two, which is a
Yeah.
doobie, yoo-hoo. But without wanting to go too much into the time period of the actual treatment, maybe let's focus on the after, like slowly coming back, coming round into life and what life is like now for you. So
Yeah.
from my point of view, you're really active. You do a lot of good work for our community. You're now a newest member of my team of volunteers. We see you every Tuesday for a tongue talk with Stephen. Which is all about rehabilitation, and also I do want to give you a shout out. You're trying to put together what's the American
Public
word,
service
an
announcements.
advert, a public service announcement for to raise awareness of tongue cancer. So you're obviously very active. You're obviously doing well from this point of view. But what is life like for you at the moment?
So I finished February 1st, and I was trying to maintain positivity. My birthday was March 1st. So I actually scheduled,
Yeah.
because I needed something to look forward to, I scheduled a birthday party in my building, in our common room, on March 1st. And my goal was to be able to be social on that day. I was like, don't buy me a birthday cake because I can't taste sugar. It tastes like garbage. But come and celebrate. And I had people again who flew in from out of town who came to celebrate me, which I was very thankful for. It was difficult though. Like, when I finished, I was using an app to speak for the first week and a half or so because it hurt so much. But I made it to a point where I was able to enjoy my birthday and I felt pretty decent. Now I look back and I'm like, I felt like shit. but I was doing so much better than I had been. Um, and so I slowly came around. I work for a film production company. I would normally, when we're in production on a TV show, I would have been working as production coordinator. I couldn't do that. My boss, who's also a friend of mine, said, "What can you do? Like, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, look, I'm a photographer. Why don't I take behind the scenes photos?" So I don't have to be there for 12 hours. I can go in and be around people and like take photos and then come back and do editing at home. So I don't need to speak too much, right? It was great. The summer came. I had to go for follow up with my surgeon in New York. So great. I stayed with friends. I booked a little weekend at a beach house. I was like, okay, I've made it. I'm at a pool. Like we hadn't open hours yet. The summer has come. It felt really good. And as an actor, I don't remember when the first time was, but I was able to say to my agent, look, start sending me out again. I can do small things. And I was able to start, like my voice, my speech gradually was getting better. And I was able to put together self tapes for musicals that were happening. Like my singing voice was impacted. My hitting higher notes was more difficult, but I've worked through that, and so things are good. And recently, I just finished working at the Toronto International Film Festival, where I worked for 6 weeks. I needed something, and the film production company is a little bit on hiatus for some other reasons. The boss is getting married and was planning on taking time off, and I was like, great. So I worked at TIFF, and I worked in the call center. I was on the phone all day.
Oh my God, Stephen! Call
Yeah,
center. Now that's a job most of us would
never.
not do
And
voluntarily.
I have to tell you, first of all, being around people so much, they were all young. I mean, I found out that I was like the same age as some people's parents, but whatever, they were lovely. Um, I was helping out people. They understood everything that I was saying. And when I heard that first tongue talk video that you posted, and I thought, wow, I filmed that a month ago or 6 weeks ago. Being on the call center forced me to actually use my voice. It helped so much. So yeah,
Mm.
I'm in a good place. I am still taking the medication. I think it's important. I tried to go off it, and I was like, nope. I think that this is really helpful in a lot of aspects of my life. Um, I am.
Yep.
Go ahead.
But also with that type of medication, you don't want to go cold turkey, do you? You want to be
I'm on the
supervised
lowest
and
dose,
come
so I
off
could have just
lightly.
taken. I was fine.
Oh, okay.
It's just helping. It's just a slight thing. And it is good
Mm.
in that sense. Um, yeah, things are good, but I still get paranoid, right? So a few weeks ago, I said to my therapist, I was like, I am convinced that there's something on my tongue. And she says, well, how do you feel about that? And I said, not good. And my response was, if it's there, I'm not doing treatment again. Which was a hard thing to say out loud, but it's been a long road. I'm tired of hospitals. I'm tired of it. Would I do it? My doctor would probably convince me to go through treatment if it happened. But I did actually see. I had a Zoom with my doctor, and he calmed me down. I think what had happened, because the sides of our tongue, it's raw. We have to do fluoride treatment every day, and I think that I was using too much fluoride and that it was irritating the spot. Because I took a few days off, and it seemed to get better. I started doing the salt rinse again. It healed it. I think that I had bitten it during the night or something.
Mm.
So that's another thing that we're working on. I'm working. I just saw the dentist yesterday to try and get some sort of night guard that I can wear to help with like biting at night, which is I think what's happening. But that
Mm.
paranoia is there. It's more acute than it ever was because I've had 3 instances in the last 4 years. Um,
Yeah, yeah, that's a lot
yeah,
in a very
yeah,
short time period. That's a
yeah,
lot to deal with, and I think too, you know what, to a degree, I think it's natural, it's normal, because I mean it's. Let me just think. So I'm 5 years out. My last scare I had a year ago. And the first 2 or maybe even 3 years there was a lot. I mean, there were so many bumps and lumps and
yeah,
constantly something new. And every time it was like, oh, is it back? Is it not back? And my personal test is now, if I have something come up, I leave it
Yeah.
like 5 days. If it's not gone after 5 days, because the tongue should heal itself, or it should, if it hasn't started healing, phone up my team, and they're really good at getting me in for an appointment really quickly. And every time we've had ultrasounds, and I had so many of those pin biopsies
Yeah.
in my neck and stuff. But it's every time it's been like, oh no, that's good, it's all good. But the emotional stress that you're going through whilst you're in that waiting position is brutal. And it is so difficult to just live a fairly normal life during those times. I mean, my poor husband, he gets his head bitten off all the time. When I'm slightly not well, I'm like, because I'm in fight or flight. So my entire
Yeah.
body is dysregulated. So yeah, I think although yeah, it's kind of natural and normal to feel that way, it doesn't make it any easier,
No,
does it?
it's interesting as you were talking. I'm thinking it's so wonderful though that well, it's unfortunate that your husband has to deal with that side and see it, but also you have like a support system right there who understands. And I think that
Yeah.
that's really important. I'm single and live alone. I can get in my own head and not have anyone to talk to about
Mm.
it, to calm me down. And so I do need to reach out to people, and so having someone there is great. And not everyone has that support. I mean, there are people in our community who have shared stories of family who have been unsupportive, who don't understand. And I
Mm-hmm.
think people, because they're so little known, people don't actually understand. They, and you've said it, like when you have a head and neck cancer, and when you have something with your mouth, it's a constant. You're always thinking about it. If you've had a skin cancer, you can have it removed, and it's terrible, and you'll think about it, but it doesn't affect your daily life so much. Breast cancer is horrific, and I know so many people who have gone through it, and it's a constant worry. Um, and they're able to speak and go through life. The way I'm saying this is going to make it sound like I'm trying to make us sound worse. We're not. It's just so present all the time because it affects daily life and
Mm.
communication.
Communication and
Yeah.
eating,
Oh God,
eating,
eating.
swallowing, and it's such a daily
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, yeah. No, I totally get what you mean. And yeah, no, absolutely. I think you actually said it quite well. It's really funny with the whole relationship thing because like you say, we see within our group some of
Yeah.
different experiences that people have, and some people being single, and also I don't know if you've gone back into dating life or not, or if you're ready for that,
Yeah.
but or what that is like. But also, I just going to share a little anecdote. With my husband, he's been super supportive, absolute my hero for 5 years, and this weekend he
Oh.
cracked. He finally cracked, but it was great because we were able to communicate it. But it's something small. I had really bad fatigue, and I just needed to go home. We were in the pub. I said, "Hun, I just need to go. I need to go home. I'm so fatigued." But I didn't communicate very well, and I just went, "I need you to cook me dinner. I need you to draw me a bath, and then I need to go to bed. And I want you there because I don't want to be lonely." And he was like, "But that's not fair." And oh my God, I had steam coming out the side of my ears because I was like, "Not fair? Shall I tell
Oh.
you about not fair?" And he straight away went, "Ooh, that was the wrong thing to say." I was like, "Yeah, but I probably could have communicated better that I needed actual help and not that I was just being
Yeah.
a lazy diva." It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, yeah. So, you live, you learn, and you progress. But I said to him, "You know what? Well done. It's taken 5 years for you to actually admit that this is hard on you too."
That's a really,
Because
yeah,
that's
and
what
that's
it
a
is.
really big step for him to admit that and for you to be aware of it as well, so you can actually have that
Mm.
communication. Like it's probably
Yeah.
not like a high point in your relationship, but how important is it that you can actually communicate that together? I think that's really great. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Stephen, where are we?
Can I
It's
just say, I
55
know we're
minutes
a
in.
little far. I want to say something that I think is important if anyone's made it this far. Being able to advocate for yourself is so important. I think people are especially, um, if you've not been in the hospital before, if you've never, to know what to ask for. Like we're in a world now where you can ask people in young tongues. You can ask AI, what are the questions I should be asking? What are the things that I should know in advance? What will I be dealing with afterward? Like, there's more information out there. And I think putting your head in the sand, like I did, is actually doing yourself a disservice. It creates, having more information can also make you scared, but at least you know what to expect and you know what to ask. And I think that it helps your team, your care team, have a little more respect for you. I ask questions. I go in with a list every time I'm there, and they are ready for me with the questions. They know I'm going to be asking, and I think it's important that people do that. I also went into some of my appointments with friends because I said, look, I will hear but won't hear. I'm going to forget what they say. Can you come in with me so that I feel comfortable? Or even to ask, do you mind if I record this session? Because they give you so much information, and it's a lot of stuff you're not aware of. It's stuff you've never heard before, terms you're not familiar with. I think people really need to advocate for themselves so that their care team does understand what how they want a quality of life. You and I think, have been very fortunate, and many people, to have a really good care team. But there are places, there are caregivers whose goal is to fix you, but in the immediate, but they don't care so much about the long term. And we need to be able to be there to advocate for ourselves for the long term.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And on top of that, I would also add that it's totally okay to listen to your own body and listen to your own mind and say, actually, this is too much for me. So you said earlier about information. Obviously, with Young Tongues, it's a great resource. It wasn't there when I had it, but I also could see myself being pretty overwhelmed by a lot of the stuff that goes on in the messaging board, especially when you are newly diagnosed. And I always advocate that you're always allowed to leave and you're always allowed to come back. So there's no right or wrong for anyone. I remember we have some people who want to know everything, and they want to know the micro biomarkers of these types of cancer. And I'm like, wow, if you're able to, digest that, great on you. And others just want to know enough to get them through moment by
That's
moment,
totally
and
fine.
that's fine too. Yes, absolutely. But the bringing your questions and bringing someone with you to take notes or recording it, such a
Yeah,
valuable piece of insight, and so helpful. So yeah,
no
thank you,
problem.
Stephen. And just in general, thank you, Stephen, for being a fantastic member of our community, for everything that you do. Thank you for recording those what feels hundreds of clips for us. We have content for a very, very long time. I just want to say to anyone listening, we are seeing your feedback, we are seeing your comments. At one point we will summarize and do something about them, but yeah, keep them coming, keep your questions coming. That's really, really helpful, and it helps us shape our resources and
Yeah.
content for the future. But Stephen, I also just want to say, really appreciate the effort and time you put into the community, and also your work beyond that as well. I know for a fact that we will be inviting you back onto the podcast with our lovely Jamie in the future. But for now, thank you so
And
much for
thank
joining
you.
us.
Before we end, I just want to say thank you, because until I met Jamie on TikTok, and until I found Young Tongues as a result of Jamie, I was the only person that I ever knew who had tongue cancer. So yeah, I sometimes leave the group, like I just turn it off and I go back, but it's really important, and I really feel blessed to have the community that you've created. I even shared it with my care team yesterday. So you may have people who are researching who may subscribe, who knows. But having clinicians who are aware of it as well, I want them to know so that they can share with their patients. Yeah, yeah. So thank you for what you're
Absolutely.
doing.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. I'll
You're
take that.
welcome.
Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you to our listeners. Thank you for sticking with us again. We have so many more episodes coming your way. I can't tell you what they're about because I haven't recorded them yet. I seem to be saying that at the end of every episode at the moment, but here you go. Welcome to my life of chaos. But please don't forget, subscribe, give us 5-star reviews. We love them. Make sure you follow us on social media. And if you would like to come onto the podcast because you are a patient or a caregiver or an expert, then please email us on podcast@youngtonguesglobal.com. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a fabulous day.
Bye.
Bye.